This episode of Still Untitled is brought to you by Movement Watches. Started by two broke college kids that wanted to wear stylish watches but couldn't afford them, Movement Watches was founded on the belief that style shouldn't break the bank. Movement Watches have a classic design, quality construction, and styled minimalism that can start at just $95. At a department store, you're looking at $400 to $500. Get 15% off today with free shipping and free returns by going to mvmtwatches.com/untitled. Again, that's mvmtwatches.com/untitled. Now on with the show.
Welcome to Still Untitled, the Adam Savage Project. I'm Will.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Norm.
And we have a guest, the amazing Jen Schachter. Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Hey, Jen.
Welcome.
Everybody
Thank
welcome
you.
Jen. Jen designed the South by South lawn sign that you saw us build on Tested back when the White House had South by South lawn. Perhaps the first and last.
When the White House cared about things like science and making things in America and, you know, those types of projects.
Back then.
Indeed.
You know, back in the good
There
times.
are still some of my friends at the Office of Science and Technology Protocol, and they are fighting. They're doing the good work that they always did over there. They're doing their best.
I was at a thing a few weeks ago and met a bunch of people that worked at the White House, and some that are continuing in different services and departments.
Mm-hmm.
And like there was a series of really fascinating conversations about how that whole transition has happened, and like that I think I'm probably not supposed to talk about when I realize now.
This isn't a political discussion. I mean, the people I assert this is not a political discussion because the people there.
You can just say whatever you want, and then it's true. That's the way it works now. You say this isn't a political discussion, but I think that Trump is a fascist. Not political. It's just alternate facts.
Or what did someone try on me the other day? Oh, I'm not a racist. I'm a realist, and I was like, block.
Yeah, like,
I'm not a racist. How to identify racism?
Clue number one.
it's much worse to accuse somebody of being a racist than it is to actually be a racist in 2017.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Anyway, sorry. What I was going to say
Not
was that the
politics.
people that work at the White House believe in the process. They believe in they believe in their work. They're not working there to make a whole crap ton of dough. They are working there because they believe in the process of government, and it's lovely to sit and talk to them, even when they feel resistance from an administration.
Yeah.
When I talked to the head of the White House wood shop, he'd been there since the Reagan administration, and told all sorts of amazing stories. How George H.W., the first Bush president, loved to come down and use the table saw all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
The Secret Service let him use the table saw?
So he said he'd be working, and the Secret Service would come down the stairs. It's a tiny little shop.
Yeah.
It's literally smaller than this room, right? Than my shop here, but super well outfitted with some amazing craftspeople. And the Secret Service would come in, and George would come in and be like, "Can I use the table saw?" And they'd he'd use some tools and build stuff.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Made me really.
Presidential hobbies.
I love that.
Yeah, HW or a W paints.
It's a painter, yeah.
Yeah. Cat pictures or dog pictures.
No, portraits.
Portraits, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I saw a really funny thing. I don't know if I can say this. That it was like probably Onion or something about like, he's like, if you agree that my presidency was a success, then I'll paint Donald Trump into a painting forever and capture his soul in this oil painting.
Oh boy. So
But Jen, you are out
Yeah.
of Baltimore, and when Adam visited last time, when you guys collaborated on the South by South lawn sign, you work with the Digital Harbor Foundation, and since then, you work with Makerspaces.
Yeah,
That's your job. You're an artist, but you have a residency. Can you talk about that and what the Makerspace is? that you're
Sure,
working at?
yeah. So I was at a fellowship last year with Digital Harbor Foundation and got connected through that to another foundation that does philanthropic work in the city in Baltimore, and they are sort of sponsoring me to research maker spaces and maker culture and figure out how do makers get to be makers, how do we make more of them, how do we make them successful. So I'm out here, working on a project with you guys and also doing some research while I'm in the Bay Area to see what other maker spaces are doing out here.
This is a good place. I've started to log places like Shinola out of Detroit, where it's a local company with local manufacturing, because there's a point at which the 3D printers and other rapid prototyping are going to become manufacturing tools instead of just iteration tools.
Right.
And that's where things get really exciting. I visited, and you guys have visited the Carbon
3D
printers, where
Oh, yeah.
they're looking to make manufacturing products out of those printers, not just prototypes. And they're hand building those printers in Redwood City.
And are those the ones with the carbon fiber that lays down in the plastic so the tools are rigid, or is that the other?
It's the oxygen and
Oh, okay.
DLP projector.
Okay.
Really
Oh, yeah,
fast.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I've
They're-
seen those.
Yeah.
2 feet per hour,
That's amazing.
What?
regardless of the density.
What?
It's us. So they have the greatest sales pitch ever, which is while they're talking to you about the machine. Hold on. Right there.
There's I can't tell. It might be you, Norm. I'm gonna turn you down for a sec.
Check.
No, Adam. I think you might not be aimed at the.
How about
microphone.
this?
Yeah, that's-
I realize. Sorry
Yeah.
about that. So while they're talking to you about the machine, this prints in about 5.5 minutes.
that's amazing. And that's an impossible to manufacture. Like you couldn't machine. There's no amount of machining that can make that thing.
But they can also
That is
print
wild.
in other things like rubber.
Oh.
Oh yeah, go ahead and So they can print in like usable.
Well, so I
They're
told-
material scientists.
Yeah.
That's what they are.
And the
Wow,
like
this
the
is-
layer height on this is really high quality print too. and
No,
it
I
prints that
know
quickly.
it's amazing. It's completely amazing.
And the rigidity. So it's like there's 100% infill on this too. And since they do lithography, there's no like amount of like dealing with the amount of plastic flow and all that. That's amazing.
That's correct. And this is their crappy resin. That's what they said to me. This is our crappy
This
resin.
isn't junk stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, so I
So
told
local
this-
manufacturing. That's
Yeah.
what to me, that's when I want to inspire, when I'm thinking about, well, where does this lead? These are skills that are directly applicable to the future of manufacturing,
Yeah.
where people will be able to make products for only 800 people rather than 70,000 or 100 million.
It's the thing that Bree said when they introduced the first MakerBot. Personalized manufacturing is here. It wasn't really true then. Still probably
Ahead of
but
the curve
Yeah,
slightly.
We're getting like but the setting up Makerspace is like I told the story on the podcast before, so I apologize, but I spent time in the Glowforge booth watching people do the Glowforge demo
Yeah.
at World Maker Faire last year, and like the questions I got just from being associated with Adam and Tested were like librarians and people that have community centers and all these people that have these little different size rooms, mostly kind of small spaces, and they wanted to know how they could turn that into a space that people can come make stuff and like what to do. And we talked about things like setting up tool libraries and getting laser cutters because everybody loves laser cutters, it turns out, and stuff like that.
Well, it seems like the definition of a makerspace is much less rigid than the tech shops. It's not just the institution where you can go and pay a membership and get access to certain tools. They come in all shapes and sizes for all different types of fabrication. And like Jen, we were talking earlier, like theater, like there's making all sorts of different types of disciplines. And
Yeah.
you have artist collectives, which those are makerspaces also.
absolutely.
But there could be some friction when you want to group them into the same category as a tech shop. And so
Well,
there
and-
are the cultural differences too.
And
Yeah.
to do the plug for my nonprofit that I'm on the board of, Nation of Makers, this is exactly what we seek to do, is to provide best practices for maker spaces so that they're not all, that
Yeah.
many maker spaces are just opening in a vacuum. They think, oh, let's order a vinyl cutter and a laser engraver and we have a quote maker space.
Yeah.
And that's far from the truth. And there are some hurdles to jump. And if someone else is showing you
Yeah.
the way, they're much easier to pass.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
Jen, what are you finding, Jen, in your research?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been in contact with a lot of people through Nation of Makers, which is really interesting because we're communicating across the country, and I've never met any of these people. So, but it's really neat. We've been finding, we already know this, I guess, but like that there is such a diverse range of different maker disciplines, but a lot of people don't identify themselves as makers. People that are chefs or people that are performers, or even some of the artist collectives like don't necessarily associate with the maker movement because the ethos is similar, but it's much more like DIY, and it's a live workspace, and it's like a different type of mentality than your hacker space.
Or it's seemingly a different mentality. I mean, the thing is that for all of these disciplines, the threshold to entry is lowering. You can now buy high quality film worthy cameras for less than $1,000. High-level sewing machines with computer memory are $300. The Zoom recorder is a game changer in terms of field recording and all sorts of recording. And all of these things the price is going down and down and down, and the ability to make high-quality products is going up and up.
Yeah. And there's that range too, like you were talking about, somebody just wanting to set up a space. Like there's people that are just starting and it's just tinkering or getting youth involved, all the way up to people that are, that want to pick up this skill as a professional career that they can take to, to a high paying job. So there's a whole range of like different maker competencies and, how those can be applied, whether you're a hobbyist and a tinkerer or you're a career professional.
So what phase are you still doing research, or are you starting to is the goal to put together a toolkit that you can say, here's if you have a public library, here's what you need to do?
Yeah, there's a lot of facets to it. So one of the things I'm starting to do right now is just working with our shop techs at the Makerspace I'm based out of in Baltimore, OpenWorks, which I think you got to stop by, and we'll have you come visit next week, I think.
And I ran into the head of OpenWorks somewhere else.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I really can't remember.
Will?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was talking about us shooting there that morning, and said I wouldn't recognize the space now because they've totally built it out.
Yeah, the beehives of studios are all being built out, and there's so much stuff happening. It's really cool to see.
So you have studio space there too?
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I've got a studio space, so I do like my research work and computer stuff during the day, and then like by night I go down to the shop, and on the weekends I just like live in the shop and work on and build stuff.
Youth.
Yeah. I just live
tell
there.
my wife we're going to do that. I'll let you know how that goes.
I remember the early 90s. I had a loft space down in Yosemite and Hunters Point, and I would work all day at Berkeley Repertory Theater, and then I would drive into San Francisco to work at night at Beach Blanket Babylon, and then I'd get home around 11 p.m., and I'd work until like 4 in the morning in my studio, and then I'd get up and go to work. I mean, I didn't need much sleep.
That's the
then.
life, yeah. Before this, I was doing like 4 jobs and waiting tables and doing all these things, and I would like go home and paint for like 5 hours after 2 or 3 shifts or something.
That's awesome. To your earlier point, I think it's really important that we all keep that. To me, it's really important to keep letting people know if you are making something from nothing, no matter what it is, a poem, a song, a film, a MakerBot, you are a maker. That this is just a new term for the oldest thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, and the thing. Like the thing that we found with Tested, talking to people who were doing this, because one of the things we did early on with Tested was go to Maker Faire and just talk to attendees and people who had brought stuff to show, and ranging from like the big, huge Burning Man art installations down to a junior high school kid who brought their science project and set it up at a table there, and the satisfaction, like it's a satisfaction that people don't really remember. Like as you get older, if you don't make stuff, you kind of forget how satisfying it is to spend 3 or 4 hours working on something, and at the end of the time have this thing this tangible thing you can either show people or you can hold or you can like it's a very fulfilling moment for, especially if you're used to sitting at a desk all day and like writing stuff on the internet, and you write it and post it, it's ephemeral, and then it's gone 3 hours later.
Well, one of the things I've noticed as I've been visiting makerspaces around the country is I feel like makerspaces need to put more stuff on the walls. I want to see more iterations of things to inspire. Oh, I didn't know you could make one of those. Oh, I didn't know you could make one of those. Plus, wouldn't it be great? Because it's going to, I told my son before he made his Leatherman holster, and I've said this on the podcast, get ready because you're going to build it 4 times. And he was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, no, you're going to, I screwed up 3 times.
You did it 3, yeah. On the video twice, I think.
Yeah. And I want to see someone put up a board of all the screw ups before the final.
Well, so have you been to NYC Resistor?
No.
So NYC Resistor is one of the early makerspaces that I had ever heard of. It's the one that Boing Boing wrote about in the early 2000s because they wanted to get a laser cutter and needed to figure out a way to afford $25,000. Yeah. And it's what MakerBot and Rep and a bunch of other projects came out of. But when we went there in 2012 or 2013, they have just like, it's like a graveyard of old busted stuff, right? So it's all the stuff that people have donated and all the projects that people got halfway done on and then didn't finish, and like some of it's fair game and some of it's in progress, and it felt kind of like a cluttered attic that had a bunch of smart people and cool tools in there.
And that's what every makerspace should feel like. I really feel like, whether it's things hang from the ceiling on monofilament, but you should be able to go in and be like, you can't. I know there's a school of thought that if you provide kids with the tools, they're just going to use them. And I disagree. I think some kids are like that. Some kids are self-starters. I wasn't. I needed things to inspire me, which is why I still live like this.
I needed stuff to take apart. Like I was the kid who took stuff apart, and I never would have figured out how to make stuff on my own.
Oh, wow.
If it weren't for taking
Disassembling.
other like toys and
Yeah.
the old Kenner Star Wars stuff, I would take apart and see how it all went together and how
Oh my
the moving
God,
pieces
totally.
worked.
And those
That
things grant permission.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
That would be really great to start donating old things like VCRs
yeah.
and tape
Oh, yeah.
decks.
One of
Yeah.
my favorite ideas for a thing that we never did because we could never figure out how to make it work, but is to take basically a bunch of old electronics you buy at a flea market
Yeah.
and hand them to people who are smart and say, make something cool out of this, and take them, the motors from a VCR or a CD player and the laser and
Old
all this stuff.
VCRs have tremendous amounts of awesome gearing and motors and
Yeah.
stuff in them to utilize, and lots of makerspaces gathered their extra materials by culling from those things.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that I'm interested in learning about is like, how did you get your start in this? Like what sort of got the spark going that made you go into the career that you're doing or got into this hobby? So sort of like reaching out to people, even just starting within the makerspace I'm at and finding out what got you started? Like what, if you're a woodworker now, or maybe you went to school for painting and now you're a woodworker, like what did that trajectory look like? And then figuring out that process so we can like create environments that are more conducive to that.
Are you talking about the people who founded the makerspaces? Or just people who work in
just
the
people
space?
who work. We're just going to start off with like people who work there and branch out. I mean, I'd love to have some of those conversations with Bay Area makerspaces. Is like, how did you get into this? Like what,
What's your origin story?
Yeah.
Origin stories are always interesting.
those are the
Speaking of
stories the
which,
best.
Ask the people who make Spider-Man.
Yes. Yeah.
They love origin stories.
Jen, speaking of which, what is your origin
Yes.
story?
My origin story. Oh wow, I wasn't prepared for this.
Did
This is a casual conversation, right?
Did your parents encourage you?
They put a paintbrush in my hand. They were just like, "Go." No, I think I was always doing that kind of stuff. Like I would always make, like you were talking about with the Legos. Like I always would like make new things for my toys. So like the Beanie Babies, like they all had outfits, and like my brother's GI Joes. Like I'd build like all this stuff for them, like tents and just like all these like supplementary things that I wanted.
Supporting his
Yeah.
GI Joe habit. With
Yeah,
extra
well, then
material.
we'd get into fights because like we'd build his whole Lego village. It was like in his room, but when he got too old and was like too cool and didn't care about it anymore, they'd like play basketball in his room and like demolish the Lego village. And I'd come in and be angry, and he's like, "This is mine. Like these are my Legos. You have no say in this." I'm like, "But you're ruining the general store." Yeah, I mean, I think I just always did stuff like that, and then I got really into fine art. So I went to school for painting and drawing and sculpture and that kind of stuff. And then just sort of found myself building things more often than rendering. I mean, I still really appreciate the rendering and the drawing, and I think spatially how things fit together. Like I know when we worked together on South by Southlawn, one of the things that was really cool was like sending sketches back and forth and sort of understanding how the pieces were going to fit together and how everything was going to work. So I really enjoy that aspect of like the drawing and conceptual piece of like how do things actually come together, like mechanically, how is it going to work?
But it's also, there's two things to mention here. One, Jen's and my drawings look very similar to each other to the degree that as we were trading drawings by email, each of us was like, "Wait, did I draw that?"
Like same
the
ink
same
style
sort of
and
style
Like
of
notation
line
and, like,
weight
yeah.
and the way we
that's funny.
annotate. But the other is that when I got to Baltimore to build the South by Southlawn sign, it's when I understood how deeply you had put that entire sign in your head, which is the most pleasurable part of building for me. And I've come to understand, and this will be a key part of our Brain Candy show, is that understanding something isn't seeing it, it's seeing it in your head.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference. It's that turn that happens.
Yeah.
And then, but transforming that, what you have solved in your head into a digital format as these tools increasingly become digital, that is a problem still to be solved.
Yeah, and it's something you need help. I mean, it's whether you're a filmmaker or a musician or a maker or a carpenter. I used to joke with Jamie Heineman and I, each of us builds stuff in our head, and then we have to transfer those builds to each other.
Yeah.
And it'd be great if we just had a little thumb
Yeah.
drive, but Jamie and
I don't think you want that.
well, Jamie and I did it through a process we ended up referring to as arguing.
Oh, yeah.
That's how we
Very
transfer that
technical,
information.
very technical process.
I mean, but it's funny because like one of the things that I found is that, I mean, this is one of the things that you told us early on is that it's always the best way to find out if somebody actually understands what you're talking about is to have them explain it back to you. And going through that process with increasingly complex projects, I've been working on software for the last year, so it's all these abstract concepts, and we're talking about terrifying math all the time, and the limits of language as a way to convey that like information in general, it's shocking.
Well, it's really difficult to even just to begin with a frame. What is the frame? I just remember my friend Dan Core trying to describe to me how to hook up a 808 timer for something. And he was like, okay, draw a rectangle and put 8 legs on it off the 4 on each of the long sides. And I was like, good, we're getting somewhere. I can do that. And then he walked me through. I know that the 808 chip might have more legs, whatever it was.
16 on a side. Yeah. But it's one of those things that our friends at Idle Thumbs, which is a video game podcast about video games by people who make video games. And I had a conversation with them years ago where we were talking about actually the physical act of sitting down and having a podcast and talking about a topic in a constructed way, in a constructed way every week, makes you better at describing the things that you're doing, which means that you're then better at communicating. It made them better at making games.
Yes.
Because they've developed an internal language, and now they all work together and make awesome games. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
but
it-
artists aren't, or makers aren't always good at explaining
Oh,
their
no.
thing. Like if you ask them about what they do, it's sometimes really hard to explain. And there comes a point in the conversation where it's like, let me get paper and I'll show you. Like
Yes.
the words can't explain it anymore. You have to.
or why did you start doing this?
Yeah.
Right? Like
The
you have
why
to-
is a hard one.
You have to go, although you have to just keep drilling back until
Yeah.
they build it up from the beginning again.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's the type of stuff I'm interested in learning about from the ground up, from every level, from youth makers to longtime professional.
Do you want people to send you stuff?
I mean, sure, yeah, that
You'll
would
probably find some good stories in the comments to this podcast.
Yeah,
Because
I mean,
tested
bring it.
users are great at posting their
Yeah.
origin
Yeah.
stories and contributing to the conversation.
that would be awesome.
And how are the spaces, as you interact with Nation of Makers, how are those makerspaces interacting?
It's been really interesting. So, I think so far it's been sort of functioning as like a duocracy. So as things come up that people want to see done, we sort of just, I guess like give a little mini shout out. I was working with the folks in Texas and in Colorado on a project, and we just sort of like started talking, and it's like, okay, let's make this thing happen. And then you connect over Slack or over email, and I think we talked about this earlier, like in response to what happened here with the fire at Ghost Ship. We identified a need that, like, okay, a lot of spaces probably don't know what they need to actually be safe or how to operate in a within fire codes and all that kind of stuff. So putting together like documents on fire code and building code, and how can you bring your space up to snuff so that you can continue to operate. So
That are easy to read and
Yes.
parse.
Yeah.
Because the
Yeah.
legislation is often quite difficult
Oh.
and dense as hell, but a local California, someone who's already set it up, can help you with the practical, here's the main things. you
Exactly.
need to
So
know.
we had like architects that would jump in and say, "Oh, I've actually helped with makerspaces before. I know how the code works, but I also know kind of like what your needs are and specifically how the makerspace functions." So sort of connecting that way. And I mean, so far it's just been like anytime something comes up that a number of spaces say, "Yeah, this would be cool if this happened," or "It'd be cool if this document existed," and people just start working together.
Oh, that's
and,
awesome.
Yeah, it's been really neat.
It's one of those things that like the makerspaces are so varied, and to Adam's point, like we've been in clean makerspaces, we've been in crazy cluttered makerspaces, and we've been in places that have like screen printing stuff, which is kind of terrifying from a fire's perspective, and like do
A
you have-
laser cutter. Everyone I
Yeah.
know who owns a laser cutter has set it on fire at some point. And
And
that
the fire
includes
marshal probably
industrial
would-
light and magic. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And the
Oh,
fire
yeah.
marshal would have no idea what that is if they come in and inspect your space. Like, what is this?
Right.
Tool? What is this? This looks like something that would start fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, or a milling, like what are the rules for what materials you can use in the laser, and like everybody has a different set of rules. The NYC resistor guys would say light it on fire, and if it turns green, don't put it in, right? And I'm just like, okay.
For the record, do not laser cut ABS plastic. No,
PVC.
no.
It makes mustard gas, doesn't it?
Yeah.
PVC makes chlorine, which is like, is that mustard gas? I don't know.
I don't know. Something that you can put in a laser cutter will turn into, the vapors will become mustard gas.
Just
is what
stick
I've
with
heard.
acrylic.
Yeah.
Acrylic, leather. We found it cut corian, actually, I believe, which is a countertop material.
The port surface stuff, does it work?
Yeah, it did. Back at ILM days, Linda Wolkovich ran through a bunch of tests.
My all-time favorite Makerspace tool was the one we went over into the mission one day that had a laser cutter that was big enough to put a 4 foot by 8 foot sheet of plywood into. And like once I saw that and I started looking around the shop, I was like, man, literally every piece of furniture in this joint has been cut out of a 4 foot by 8 foot piece of plywood.
We had one of those on the Matrix sequels when I worked there. A Beam Dynamics it was a 4x4 with a table so that you could cut half of it and shunk the table and cut the other half of it. It was plus or minus about a 16th in terms of registration, so you had to accommodate for that. But we did some beautiful large pieces.
They were cutting out, like they cut out every chair in the place was an Adirondack, right? So, yeah, it was funny.
I've also found that that regionally, geographically, there's different cultures of why people want to start makerspaces. We've heard a lot from the Bay Area because real estate is so expensive. The people starting new makerspaces here really, because of necessity, they have to come from a point of a business. Like they aren't just finding empty space and doing it because the community needs it, but because there's a need, and also they have to figure out the practical reasons to do it.
Right.
And sometimes those things come at odds with what the community needs. If they feel like they need to set up a business and make it really, and have this membership model or have these specific tools, it's not going to be exactly what a local high school needs.
Right.
Right.
Well, and also people in a place like the Bay Area where space is at such a premium, not everyone has the space in their house, apartment, studio to set up a workspace. Which is,
most people don't.
Most people don't. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've seen my Twitter feed, but I love asking people to tweet pictures of their tiny workspaces.
Yeah.
I've seen some amazing ingenuity of people building entire sewing rooms into a small broom closet.
It's like the tiny house movement, but in a makerspace.
Exactly.
Cool.
And we are going to be working on some future plans here today after the podcast.
Jen is here this week as Adam gets ready to go on his tour.
Brain Candy Live starts on the 21st in Fayetteville, North Carolina. We hit 40 cities in 7 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm heading out to do final rehearsals with Michael Stevens and our director, Michael Weber, and Magic Space team. And can't wait. I'm totally psyched.
We're seeding the groundwork for a lot of stuff, so you'll be able to see the fruits of this collaboration in the next, let's say, month or so.
Yeah, Jen and I are going to connect up again in another city, and then I'll also be at South by Southwest talking about the future of making with Andrew Coy, former senior advisor to the White House for Making, and Sonia Pryor-Jones from Fab Lab, two of my favorite people in the world, and we're going to be talking about making going forward.
Awesome.
Yeah, but while Adam's on tour, we're still going to try to do as many.
We are not going to miss a podcast. I'm sorry about those 2 weeks. I know it was rough, but we are going to use some technology and do podcasts on the road. That way we have relevant podcasts to what's been going on.
Yeah,
we could just talk like, look, I watched Saturday Night Live last night and it was already 2 or 3 news cycles behind. Like
Things are moving fast, man.
It's hard to do a podcast yesterday about today.
I need to talk to someone about John Wick 2.
I haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen it yet, too. I read Death's End, by the way.
The third
book
one?
Yeah.
I'm still waiting on Norm to finish the second one, so I think we should just dump him and talk about it.
I think we should, because people have been asking for the Dark Forest spoiler
I have
cast.
to almost reread it at this point. It's been so long.
To start Death's End, I had to go back and read a detailed synopsis because I had forgotten all the little bits of. And by the way, Death's End.
That's what everybody says.
Mind blown. I mean, it takes Dark Forest and kicks it down the stairs and takes its lunch money.
And while Jen's in this week, we're doing more videos with her. I want to pick her brain because you took part in Make Magazine's big 3D printer and CNC machine test, like 50 machines or something. What was it?
I'm not sure about that number. I need to check that number, but it was a lot. We just locked ourselves in a makerspace in Rhode Island and had at it
stress
for 3
test
days.
3D
Yeah.
printers.
Nice.
Yeah, it was
CNCs.
hot. We were sweating. We were 3D printing and milling, and it was great. It was a great.
ABS fumes everywhere.
Yeah,
Ah, sounds great.
yeah.
Have you guys seen fidget spinners?
Yeah.
Do you know what they are?
Uh-huh.
So I had
No.
never seen those before. I meant to bring it today. I totally forgot.
It sounds like the name sounds really cool.
It is. You have a Carvey. You can make one with a Carvey and some. You have ball bear.
I have a
skate
full
bearings.
bush of bearings and bushings.
So you basically they have on the Carvey they have a preset where you put in like the configuration you want. You can set the number of like bearings you want to put in and all that. And you use the center bearing to spin and you weight the outside edges and spin. And it's apparently something that like junior high school kids are making in their shop classes now instead of
Nice.
bongs, which is what they made in the shop class when I was in junior high
Bongs.
school. Yeah. So yeah, it's
Why do you make?
I was I gave a I was one of the presenters at an awards ceremony in New York City last year for Alzheimer's research, where Seth Rogen was given an award because he and his wife have contributed a lot to Alzheimer's research. And Seth's acceptance speech was, "This is even a greater honor than when I won Person of the Year from High Times magazine twice. I don't believe that I can turn this award into a bong like theirs, but I promise you that I will try."
So I have a friend who's a high school shop teacher, and his favorite thing is to figure out like how the kids are like stealth manufacturing bongs, and then like it looks all perfectly innocuous. Until you assemble it, and then it's like the gun from The Line of Fire or something
Right.
like that.
Well, so
yeah.
to this end, old friend of mine, my first roommate in San Francisco, went to Center Hardware. He was going to make a pipe using only brass plumbing hardware, like quarter-inch NPT
of course.
brass plumbing hardware. So he puts together the L and the little and the like the 6 pieces he needs. And then he realizes these are going to be obvious. So he then goes around Center Hardware and buys like another $60 worth of
Decoy
stuff,
items,
right?
just like-
Decoy items. And the guy's boop, 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 boop. And he gets to these 5 pieces and goes, and looks at him and is like,
Busted.
Nice.
and then keeps on going.
That's amazing.
What is all the other stuff for then?
It's
Straight to the returns department.
Yeah.
We actually built a full makerspace into our 1-bedroom apartment. We had a we went to Home Depot, bought some pegboard and a workbench, and we put up a full workbench in the main living room of our house, and we had a party bring us a tool we don't have. One of my friends brought a screen printing set of
that's awesome.
screen printing hardware. Other people brought all sorts of weird things, and we made stuff full time out of there, and this is like 1990.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that idea. Bring a tool we don't have. Because
Yeah.
you always have 3 of
We had-
something.
yeah.
and
It's like a
Exactly.
housewarming, a makerspace housewarming.
And you end up, with like 30 screwdrivers, but they all kind of have some meaning.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, there's something neat about communities coming together to provide a service for that. Do you guys know about the little red libraries or the little box libraries?
Free libraries
Oh,
around.
yeah.
Yeah. So like there's people that sell a box. Like you don't have to make the library anymore if you don't have wood shop
There's like a
stuff. or
kit
what.
to like.
You can get a kit and they say here go buy a post office a mailbox stand and a bucket and some 3 bags of concrete
Oh,
and you
right,
can just set
right,
this
right.
out on your sidewalk. And it's like that.
I've been
that
wanting.
kind
I
of
keep
thing
on
for
Getting things
forgetting,
out.
but every
Yeah.
time that comes up, I want to do one in my neighborhood.
This is the right neighborhood.
It
for
is
You
the
find
right
all sorts of
neighborhood.
interesting things in there. I'm sure.
Totally.
So I guess that'll do it for us this
I
week.
think so.
Thank you, Jen, for coming by. It's good to
Yeah.
meet you.
Yeah, you too. I'm excited to be here.
And like we said, there'll be more of Jen on Tested and throughout the tour. So get used to her.
Where's the URL for the tour, Adam?
BrainCandyLive.com. We are probably coming to your city. If we are not coming to your city, I see your tweets asking me to come to Vancouver and the Pacific Northwest. Rest assured, this is not the only tour of Brain Candy Live. Just as when Jamie and I toured, we will hit many other cities this fall. We plan to tour this show more than a few times. So we will eventually get to your city. And as to your requests about the UK, It is harder for a show of our size to tour the UK, but we look into it every year to see if the cost metrics work out. And it is entirely likely that Australia is in the future. So, so keep an eye out for that.
Well, they're definitely in the future. It's tomorrow over there now.
Geez, I wonder what news they're reading because
boy.
I'm terrified.
I can't wait to see.
Every morning I open up the news and I'm like, what's going to happen? That's a good note to stop on.
Upbeat, not politics. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.